Daniel Cross had eaten in the finest restaurants in the world, private chefs in glass towers, silent servers in five-star hotels, tables where every plate cost more than most people earned in a week. Yet on this rainy afternoon, he found himself pushing open the squeaking door of a forgotten roadside diner on the edge of the city. The smell of fried eggs and old coffee filled the air. No one looked up. That was exactly what Daniel wanted. He wore a plain gray jacket, no watch, no entourage. To the world, he was just another tired man seeking lunch. Only a handful of people on Earth knew that the quiet man stepping inside was a billionaire whose name dominated business headlines. Daniel slid into a cracked vinyl booth near the back, his eyes instinctively scanning the room, not for threats, but for people. Old habit. Then he saw him. An elderly man sat alone at a small table by the window. His back was bent unnaturally, his hands trembling so badly that the spoon in his grip rattled against the plate. His food sat untouched, growing cold. A napkin rested on his chest, already stained. A few customers stole glances at him, then quickly looked away. One woman shifted seats, whispering to her companion. A man at the counter sighed impatiently. The old man tried to lift the spoon. It slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor. His shoulders sagged, his eyes filled with quiet humiliation. Daniel's throat tightened. The man looked painfully familiar, too familiar. The same silver hair, the same hollow cheeks, the same trembling hands Daniel had seen years ago in a hospital room. Dad. Daniel looked down at the menu, suddenly unable to read the words. Before the moment could sink deeper, a young waitress appeared. She couldn't have been more than 24. Her uniform was slightly faded, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She noticed the fallen spoon immediately. Instead of sighing or calling for help, she smiled. "No worries at all, sir," she said gently. She bent down, picked up the spoon, and replaced it with a clean one. Then, without hesitation, she pulled a chair beside him and sat down. Daniel froze. The diner seemed to quiet as if the air itself was listening. "Let's try together," the waitress said softly. Slow as perfectly fine, she guided the old man's shaking hand, steadying it with her own. When he managed a small bite, she smiled as though he had accomplished something extraordinary. "That's it. You're doing great." The old man's eyes watered. He nodded, unable to speak. Daniel felt a sharp pain in his chest. The waitress fed him patiently, spoon by spoon, wiping his mouth when food spilled, never once showing embarrassment or discomfort. When the man dropped the spoon again, she simply laughed lightly. "Happens to the best of us," she said. Daniel watched as minutes passed. Other waitresses hurried around, customers finished meals and left, but she stayed. Entirely present, entirely kind. When the plate was nearly empty, the old man reached into his pocket with shaking fingers and pulled out a handful of coins. They spilled onto the table. His face flushed red. I don't think." "Enough," he murmured. The waitress quickly covered the coins with her hand. "Sir, please don't worry about that." "But, it's already taken care of," she said warmly. Daniel knew what that meant. She paid for it herself. Something inside him shattered. Years ago, when his own father's hands began to shake, Daniel had told himself he was too busy. Too important. He had signed papers, hired professionals, sent money instead of time. "He's being taken care of," Daniel had said. Watching this stranger receive more kindness from a waitress than his own father received from him felt like a quiet accusation. The waitress helped the old man, dabbed his mouth, adjusted the napkin, and stood. "You sit here as long as you like, okay?" she said. "I'll check on you." As she walked away, the old man clasped her hand weakly. "Thank you," he whispered. Daniel lowered his head. In that forgotten diner, at a quiet table by the window, a billionaire realized something devastating. True wealth had nothing to do with money. Daniel Cross sat in his booth long after his untouched food had grown cold. The clatter of dishes, the hiss of the grill, and the low murmur of conversations blurred into background noise. His eyes followed the young waitress as she moved from table to table, refilling cups, smiling politely, working with the quiet exhaustion of someone used to long shifts and short thanks. But Daniel saw something else. He saw intention. She wasn't performing kindness for attention. No one was watching her now. Yet she still paused to check on the elderly man by the window, adjusting his napkin, placing his cup closer so he wouldn't have to reach too far. Daniel finally stood and walked toward the counter. Each step felt heavier than the last. "Excuse me," he said softly. The waitress turned, surprised but polite. "Yes, sir. Can I get you anything?" Her eyes were tired up close, shadowed by sleepless nights. A faint bruise darkened her wrist, old and healing, life marks, not accidents. Daniel hesitated. He wasn't used to hesitation. "I wanted to ask you something," he said. "About the man by the window." Her expression softened instantly. "Is something wrong?" "No," Daniel replied quickly. "Nothing like that. I just noticed how you helped him." She glanced toward the window table to make sure the old man was comfortable. Only then did she look back. "He comes in sometimes," she said. "Usually alone." "You don't have to do all that," Daniel said carefully. "Most people wouldn't." She gave a small, sad smile. "Most people didn't." Daniel felt that sentence land somewhere deep. "Why?" he asked. "Why do you care so much?" For a moment, she didn't answer. She picked up a stack of plates, then set them down again, as if realizing the question deserved more than a rushed reply. "My name is Lily," she said finally. "And my dad used to sit like that." Daniel's chest tightened. "He had a stroke when I was 16, she continued. "Lost movement, lost words, lost friends, too." She let out a quiet breath. "People are uncomfortable around weakness. They pretend it's invisible." Daniel said nothing. "I used to feed him at diners like this," Lily said. "Strangers would stare. Some would complain. One time, a manager asked us to leave because we were disturbing the other customers." Her voice never rose, but the pain underneath it was unmistakable. "So when I see someone like him," she said, nodding toward the window, "I don't see a burden. I see my father." Daniel swallowed hard. "Where is your father now?" he asked. Lily's eyes dropped to the counter. "He passed away 2 years ago. Complications." "I'm sorry," Daniel said quietly. "Thank you." She smiled faintly. "I promised myself something after he died." "What was that?" "That no one like him would ever feel invisible in front of me." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Invisible. That was exactly how his own father had looked the last time Daniel visited the facility, sitting in a wheelchair, staring at a wall while staff hurried past. Daniel had checked his phone during that visit. He remembered now. "What if no one helps them?" Daniel asked, his voice rougher than he intended. Lily met his gaze. "Then today, they had me." The simplicity of her answer struck him harder than any accusation. A man in a business suit entered the diner, phone pressed to his ear, speaking loudly about profits and meetings. The contrast made Daniel feel sick. "How much do you make here?" he asked suddenly. Lily blinked. Enough to get by." "Why?" He shook his head. "No reason." The old man by the window began coughing, his hands shaking violently. Lily excused herself immediately, rushing to him, holding the glass as he sipped water. Daniel watched her calm him, rubbing his back gently, whispering reassurance. She wasn't his daughter. She wasn't his nurse. She was just kind. Daniel returned to his booth and pulled out his phone. His fingers hovered over the screen. After years of delegating emotional responsibility to assistants and lawyers, he made the call himself. "Hello," he said when the line connected. "This is Daniel Cross." There was a pause, then a flurry of respectful responses. "I want my father transferred," Daniel said firmly. "Out of the facility. Today." Another pause. "Sir, are you sure?" "Yes," Daniel snapped, then softened. "I'll take full responsibility." He ended the call and sat back, his heart pounding. Lily returned to the counter. Daniel stood, paid his bill, and left a tip far larger than necessary, but money suddenly felt inadequate. As he walked toward the door, he turned back. "Lily," he said. She looked up. "You changed something today," he said quietly. "I don't think you even realize how much." She smiled politely, unaware of the storm she had started. And as Daniel stepped out into the gray afternoon, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was only the beginning. The diner was unusually quiet the next morning. Lily noticed it the moment she stepped inside. No sizzling grill, no familiar clatter of dishes, no smell of fresh coffee. The lights were on, but the chairs were stacked upside down on the tables. Her heart skipped. "Hello," she called. A man in a dark suit stood near the counter, his posture too formal for a diner this small. Another suited man waited near the door. Lily's stomach tightened. "Am I in trouble?" she wondered. Before she could ask, the door opened again. Daniel Cross walked in. He looked different today. Still simply dressed, but his presence filled the room in a way it hadn't before. Not intimidating. Heavy. Like a man carrying something important. "Good morning, Lily," he said gently. She froze. "Sir, is something wrong?" Daniel shook his head. "No, something is finally right." He gestured for her to sit. Confused and nervous, Lily lowered herself onto a chair. One of the men in suits placed a folder on the counter. Daniel didn't open it yet. "Last night," Daniel began, "I brought my father home." Lily's breath caught. "For years, I told myself he was being taken care of," Daniel said, his voice steady but strained. "I used money instead of presents. I convinced myself that was enough." He looked at her directly. "Yesterday, I saw you feed a man who had nothing to give you in return." Lily shook her head. "I didn't do it for anything." "I know," Daniel said. "That's why it mattered." He opened the folder and slid it toward her. Inside were neatly organized documents. "What is this?" she whispered. "A future," Daniel replied. "If you want it." Lily flipped through the pages, her hands trembling. A fully paid nursing scholarship. Housing assistance. A monthly stipend that exceeded her yearly income. "I can't accept this," she said quickly, pushing the folder back. "I was just doing my job." Daniel didn't move the folder. "No," he said softly. "You were doing what I failed to do." Tears burned Lily's eyes. "I don't want charity." "This isn't charity," Daniel said firmly. "It's responsibility. And gratitude." He took a breath. "I'm starting a foundation. One focused on dignity care for the disabled and elderly. And I need someone who understands what dignity actually means." Lily stared at him. You," Daniel said. "If you say yes, you won't just manage paperwork. You'll help build something real." Silence filled the diner. Lily thought of her father. Of the stairs. Of the nights she cried in hospital chairs. Of promises whispered into quiet rooms. She nodded slowly. "Yes." Daniel smiled. Not the polished smile of a billionaire, but the relieved smile of a son finally doing the right thing. Weeks later, sunlight streamed through the windows of Daniel's home as he knelt beside his father at the kitchen table. The old man's hands shook violently, spilling oatmeal onto the table. "It's okay, Dad," Daniel said, steadying the spoon. "We'll take it slow." His father looked up at him, confused, then smiled. Across the room, Lily watched silently. Daniel glanced at her. "You taught me this." She shook her head. "You just needed to see it." Every Sunday after that, 3 chairs sat at the same roadside diner: the billionaire, his disabled father, and a former waitress who had never stopped being a caregiver. Other customers watched. Some whispered. But Daniel no longer cared. He fed his father patiently. Lily laughed with the old man. And something warm and healing settled over that small table by the window. One afternoon, Daniel noticed a young boy staring at them. "Why does that man feed him?" the boy asked his mother. The mother hesitated. Daniel leaned down and answered gently, "Because love doesn't disappear when bodies get weak." The boy nodded, as if understanding something important. Lily smiled. The diner owner later hung a small sign near the counter. "Kindness is always served here." Daniel funded care centers across the city. Lily graduated top of her class. And the old man by the window, once invisible, was never alone again. Because sometimes, the greatest inheritance isn't money. It's learning how to care.